We're going to be looking at 20 players that you can pick up off waivers for week 12. And it's a big week. We got the Thursday Thanksgiving games. We got a game on Friday. And then our usual games on Sunday. So week 12 is going to have a lot of action. So we need to look at the waiver wire now. Get on it hot and early so we can be ready for these games that are going to happen on Thanksgiving Day, because we're getting 3 of them. Usually we get 1, and then we're getting a follow-up game on Friday. But what you really need to do right now is click that subscribe button. Tap it with your finger on your phone. Click it with the mouse on your computer, because we're going to help you in the waiver wire. We're going to do that every week. We're going to do that every year. So you're going to need me next year for your draft research. Also, I'm going to help you set your lineups. I'm going to be having lineup setting videos starting tomorrow for those Thursday games. We're also going to help you win those trades. Even though the trade deadline's coming for a lot of you, or it's already have passed, I'm going to help you win those trades as well. And also in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Ric Flair's watching you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't disappoint him. But let's dig in. Let's look at these 20 players. First one, Zach Charbonnet. Kenneth Walker's hurt, came out of last week's game, and now it looks like it's going to be the Zach Charbonnet show. For how long, we don't know. Last I've heard, Pete Carroll said they know he's injured. He knows he's going to be out for some time. He's not ready to be on IR status, but they do not know how long he's going to be out. That was the last blurb I've read. Maybe something else came out between now and the time you watch this video. But Walker's injured. Everyone's looking at Zach Charbonnet. He should be rostered in a lot of leagues, if not most of your leagues. Not a huge waiver wire claim considering that. I've been telling you to pick him up every week for the last few weeks. But some people, they're pretty feisty. They want to see a player hit. They want to see the tea leaves right in front of their face. They want things that actually happen. But here it is. It's your last opportunity. People are picking him up now. 21 opportunities in week 11. The big question here is that schedule going forward. However, if you need touches, you need touches, and Charbonnet can get you touches. And when you are getting touches out of the running back position, that is a lottery ticket that could help you no matter what the matchup is. And those running backs are not getting touches. They're getting less opportunities to score fantasy points. Common sense, right? Zach Charbonnet can score fantasy points to a fair clip here. We saw that against Washington. We saw that last week. Maybe we can get something out of these bad matchups, but it's still, he's catching the ball out of the backfield. He has a little bit of upside. He's getting some work and still getting used, and some of you guys may need that in your lineups, or at least as a guy on the back end of your roster while you're preventing somebody else from using him in their lineups. Now we're looking at Jayden Reed. He's been hot lately. Last 2 games, 19 fantasy points in each of them, and hitting double-digit PPR fantasy points and a lot of other performances. Last 4 games, 5 targets a game, 14.3% target share. Runs a lot of snaps out of the slot with a good ADOT. That's an intriguing factor there. You got a deep ball guy, and he's running in the slot because he's a very nuanced, well-rounded wide receiver, second-round pick. Broke out with 2 different collegiate programs. Jayden Reed's a good wide receiver. Consistent, good enough to get you by. Of course, there'll be down weeks, but Jayden Reed's damn good. Keaton Mitchell. He's on waivers in a lot of leagues right now. A lot of people dumped him last week because he only scored 5 fantasy points. But look at him more as like a Rashid Shaheed, Will Fuller-esque player, as he's going to be a home run hitter, which means he's going to have his valleys and he's going to have his peaks, and it's going to be hard to time until he starts seeing a larger workload of the offense. But he's so damn explosive on any given touch. He can be a huge fantasy contributor. Since week 9, 32.4% opportunity share, 23 touches, 4 targets, which leads all the running backs in this offense. And he's the RB12 in PPR, which is crazy. That does not count the Monday night game, so he's probably like RB13 or something. But still, Keaton Mitchell has upside, and he's a home run swing in your lineup. If you miss, you'll strike out. If you hit, you're hitting big. And that's just Keaton Mitchell right now until he starts getting more touches. Isaiah Likely is the next man up here in Baltimore at tight end. Mark Andrews is out. He's injured, and he's the next guy up. He was a preseason dandy last year. A lot of people were picking him up off waivers last year as a hope and prayer. And Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews, and he soaks up the target share. Andrews is out. Likely is going to be somewhat fantasy relevant for a tight end. It's going to be up and down, just like any other tight end. But he's going to be running routes. He's going to be seeing targets. He saw a 74% snap share last week with Andrews out. So likely is going to be seeing an increase in workload. Will that mean production? We don't know. We do know targets get funneled to the tight end in the system, but it could get moved around to the wide receivers as well. Josh Downs, if he's on waivers, get him now, because a lot of people dropped him over these last few weeks. He was on bye. He had 2 rough games. People get volatile with these players. He's a young rookie who splashed in weeks 5 through 8, 7.3 targets per game, a 21% target share, and scored 16.6 points per game, wide receiver 11. It's not cherry picked. That's when he was running hot before he started getting nicked up with injuries, then was back on the field. 4.3 targets per game in his last 3, but that volume can come back. He's a player you want to pick up. We got Tampa Bay on the horizon. Teams want to throw it on Tampa Bay. They don't want to run it on them. You might see some bounce back action coming with Josh Downs. Jeff Wilson was a healthy scratch last week. Devon Achane came out. Salvon Ahmed came out with injuries. That's something we got to pay attention to. Jeff Wilson's not a guy you're running to the waiver wire and getting. You may want to wait for it to all process, watch these injuries a little bit, maybe pick him up on the back end for cheap. But he's been a healthy scratch. But still, if you monitor the injuries and they progressively get worse and they're out for some time, but there was a blurb Achane might be back for this week, it's up in the air. So you watch the air, see what happens, and if it seems beneficial for Wilson, stash him. If not, move on. Romeo Doubs, scoring fantasy points, starting to be consistent here, a little bit volatile, but if you're looking for a wide receiver off waivers who could splash but still kind of get you by in your fantasy matchup, Romeo Doubs can do that. Look at these last few matchups here. In week 7, 11 fantasy points. Week 8, 11. Week 9, 6. Week 10, 12. Week 11, 16. So there are down weeks because we should expect that. But still, 11 points, 12 points, good enough to get you by, good enough to get the job done as you're trying to patch things up off the waiver wire. Guys you're picking up off waivers, you're not expecting them to turn into Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. You're expecting to put some spackle on the drywall with these players. You're not expecting to go off with them. So if you're getting consistent production like that, take it and run with it. Ezekiel Elliott is a guy you want to look at as a handcuff to Ramondre Stevenson. He's getting a 38.8% opportunity share. He's seen double-digit touches in a lot of games. Again, handcuff running back who will become an important piece in fantasy if something happens to Ramondre Stevenson, because he will double up on the touches pretty much, get more opportunities there, and a running back that's getting touches nonetheless, which is something you want in fantasy because you can cross the goal line, rack up a couple carries that could lead to something, maybe a couple targets here and there. But again, high-end handcuff for fantasy football, nothing more. Demario Douglas, another Patriot here, but he's getting targets. He's getting plenty. He's getting 7.7 a game here, 23.7% target share. Any wide receiver who's getting a target share higher than 20 should not be sitting on waivers. You can really play with that wide receiver, especially as a guy you juggle in and out of your lineups as you play the matchups. You kind of want that throughout the season. That could lead to production. And overall here, last few weeks, 11 fantasy points, 7 in week 8, 10 in week 9, 14 in week 10. So he's good enough to get you by, even with that low ADOT. Something you may want to explore for the rest of the season here. Roschon Johnson, we're back here again, but Deonta Foreman's dealing with an ankle injury. Gotta watch that. If Khalil Herbert's somewhere on waivers, he shouldn't be. He should have been stashed on IR. Pick him up ahead of Roschon Johnson. Khalil Herbert got 16 carries in that game. He was getting the workload, but I expect him to be rostered. Roschon Johnson's on waivers. Again, hoping a prayer. He was getting touches when it was him and Herbert, so that could come back. He was using the passing game a little bit. Good size, adjusted athleticism with him, and really, he's a hope and a prayer type of play for the rest of the season. Rashid Shaheed, I love him as a wide receiver prospect for redraft fantasy football because of the upside from week to week. The downside is down, but the upside is grand, and if you're looking for a peak and valley player, this is it. This is it. He's getting 5 targets a game, 15% target share, but a 15 ADOT, which is elite. So if he brings in a ball or two in some of these contests, he could splash. We've seen that throughout the season. Look at week 6, 18 fantasy points. Then week 7, just 7. Then week 8, 24. Week 9, 5. Week 10, 7. So when you start him, you know you're getting 5 to 7 fantasy points, or you could get 18 to 25. You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. However, when he scores 5 to 7, even though that really sucks, when you compare him to the rest of the wide receivers on waivers, say Romeo Doubs, he's scoring around 12 fantasy points right now. We just talked about him. 5 fantasy points compared to that. Let's compare to low. So what? 6, 7 fantasy points away. Is that really going to kill you in your matchup? It could if it's close. But again, you're shooting for that upside, and if you need that, that's a player to look at. A.J. Dillon here might be on the upswing because he has a trend of going off when it starts to get cold back into November and December. He has that trend through history. Aaron Jones had a knee injury in last week's game. Got to monitor that. Monitoring all this news. But a guy you may want to pick up. Should be rostered in a lot of leagues. But a lot of people have been dropping him too. So you really got to cover your bases when you're doing the content here. Saw 72 snaps last week. Should be seeing more workload. Jameson Williams, the Will Fuller effect that I like to talk about. He's deep ball city. His snaps are increasing. Could be a guy down the line who sees more targets, more downfield opportunities, could lead to some splash matchups. Like I said with Rashid Shaheed, you're going to catch matchups where he scores 5, 7, 6 fantasy points 3, 4 times in a row, and then you're going to catch that splash week, and it's going to win that week. And you're going to have to play with this wide receiver in your lineup, and when you're asking to start sits, you're never going to know because it's not really matchup dependent. It's really situational dependent of that series, of that drive. And if you hit, you hit. And if you miss, you miss. And that's the type of player. Kind of like Keaton Mitchell right now until he starts getting more touches and carries. A lot of people were talking about Keaton Mitchell. I hate to go back to him, but they were starting him over Josh Jacobs. I saw some big-time analysts saying that. And then I'm the guy who's the Keaton Mitchell guy talking him up, saying, hey. He's a home run swing. If you're back against the wall, he's an upside play. Kind of like Jameson Williams here. You need to play it like that. And you got to understand what you're getting into and how to classify these players because they're assets here in fantasy that you're wheeling and dealing in your lineups. Kind of like an investment portfolio. That being said, you want handcuffs in your investment portfolio this late in the season. If something happens to Bijan, they're going to be using Tyler Algier. He's going to be getting too much workload because we've seen that before. We saw it last year. We've seen it this season. Something happens to Bijan. You have Bijan. You want Tyler Algier. If you don't have Bijan, you want Tyler Algier if something happens to Bijan because everybody's going to want him off waivers. He's going to be getting about 20 touches a game. And that may equate to a lot of fantasy points or just enough to get you by. But you're going to want that because that could be a flex play. That could be your RB2. People are getting hurt with injuries and bye weeks right now. A handcuff like him could really put you over the top if bad things happen to Bijan. Also, Khalil Shakir is another volatile player to look at here. Again, look at these numbers. Week 8, 15 fantasy points. Week 9, 9. Week 10, 3. Then week 11, 20. Just like Jameson Williams. Just like Rashid Shaheed. You can throw Keaton Mitchell in there. Think of Keaton Mitchell in with this class of player. Up and down, because that makes sense. They're not getting a ton of targets, but they're running deep downfield. And if they connect on those, they're going to have a splash game. Shakir's in a good opportunity here with the Bills. Powerful offense, good game scripts, push it downfield, fast pace, something you want here. And then Rico Dowdle, the Tony Pollard handcuff. Something happens to Pollard, you want Dowdle. He's not stealing the work. It's not happening. Pollard's the guy. That Panthers matchup was crucial for him because if it ran bad, the media would have been all over it. It would have been a shitstorm because it was brewing. It was brewing heavy. But Pollard held off the buzzards. Rico Dowdle's the backup still. But if something happens to Pollard, Dowdle's going to be trending up. Noah Brown, watch his injury status. He was out last week. But still, if you're looking for a wide receiver, he's been on the up. 6.3 targets per game, almost a 20% target share. A good ADOTs, good air yards per game, getting deep targets. The Texans spread the ball around. They push it downfield. Anybody lining up running routes for the Texans, you want. Look at Noah Brown, especially for the rest of the season. Odell Beckham's running hot right now. 5 targets a game, almost a 20% target share, 13.5 ADOT, and he has been productive. Week 9 against Seattle, 14.6 PPR fantasy points. Week 10 against the Browns, 11. Week 11 against the Bengals, 15.6. He's getting targets downfield. If they connect on that, it is Odell Beckham City. Mark Andrews is out. These targets might start spreading around a little bit. You're going to want a piece of this Ravens offense just in case, because they get in these weird game scripts, and you might be able to hit some lottery tickets. Maybe Rashad Bateman even, because he's been trending up as well, looking better on the field. Odell Beckham, though, he is running hot. Those are 20 players that you can pick up off the waivers right now as we head into week 12. This will help you with your lineups, help you with stashes, get those handcuffs and everything else. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Ric Flair's watching you. Do not disappoint him. I want to thank you for watching, though. Catch you on the next video.